Engage your brain and enter the mind's eye. I'm your host, Brian Turnov, for Z Talk Radio. If you like what you hear tonight and from all our previous episodes, then you're going to love the articles, the videos, the pictures that we post on our social media pages. Like us on Facebook.com/Mind's Eye Show or follow us on Twitter at Mind's Eye Show. It is going to be a monumental show, pun intended. It's been nearly 35 years to the day when the Georgia Guidestones was originally erected. When I hear the phrase, a riddle wrapped in a mystery, wrapped in enigma, folks, the first thing that I think of is the Georgia Guidestones. And so many conspiracy theories have been born from various controversies that have popped up and from the unknown about this structure. On this edition, we speak with Christopher Kubas. He is the vice president of the Elberton Granite Association. That is the company responsible and tasked by the unknown person to have this monument built. Chris is going to help us answer some of the questions about its origin and the recent mysteries that have developed. In 2014, a granite cube inscribed with the numbers 2014 and some mysterious letters, it was installed in a square notch in the corner of the English language monolith. The cube was then later removed and supposedly destroyed by an Elberton official. You're going to find out the truth about these mysterious markings and what they really mean. Is it actually proof of the Guidestones' malevolent and malicious nature and a coming New World Order? Or is it something else? Something much deeper that no one would ever expect. Keep listening. The answer may shock you. Back on the other side of the break with Christopher Kubas, dishing out realities about the Georgia Guidestones. We now welcome Christopher Kubas of Elberton Granite Association. Chris, I appreciate taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with me on the Mind's Eye today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
We're talking nearly 35 years to the day when the Georgia Guidestones was originally erected. And some have called it American Stonehenge. Unfortunately, I've actually never had the pleasure to visit Georgia, the great state, or obviously the Georgia Guidestones. Luckily, in the digital age, there's 1,000 pictures and videos, and of course, that doesn't really justify seeing it with your own eyes. And so you work for the company that built it or associated with it, and you probably live in the town or the area. What's it like to witness the Georgia Guidestones or see it with your own two eyes?
I didn't actually grow up here. I moved into Elberton about 20 years ago, and I was in a completely different profession. And I remember when somebody had first told me about the Guidestones, and I became kind of interested in it, and I actually drove out to see them. And I mean, it's just beyond belief when you see them as to the enormity of them. They're really they're quite huge and overwhelming to see.
And that's definitely a feeling that I get when I'm viewing them, and I can't imagine seeing it essentially with my own two eyes. And I think part of that mystery is that it kind of harks back to the ancient times. It's shrouded in this mystery, and there's there's a piece of granite, and this is something it seems like is always going to be there. And I think people kind of get lost in maybe the timelessness of it. I think that's part of the allure of it, so to speak, is that timeless aspect to it.
Yeah. It seems something that enormous set in stone that just really gives you a sense that, hey, this is going to be around for a long, long time. Granite wears very slowly. I mean, we're talking, hundredths of an inch over a 1,000 years. So, stuff that's in it today is going to be visible on it for centuries and probably even a millennium to come.
How long do you honestly think that this could probably last in this location?
Barring any natural disaster of some sort, and it would have to be an immense natural disaster or some human interaction to deliberately dismantle them, these would potentially be here for as long as man is on this planet.
Wow, that's it's somewhat comforting and also disconcerting at the same time. It's a funny clash that's going on there, and like you said before, you're not a born and raised Elbertonian. I don't know if that's the correct nomenclature, so excuse me.
That is it.
Oh, wonderful. And so there must have been a huge boom, I would imagine, right after the Guidestones were erected. What's life, since you're now living in the area, what's it like to live in there with the Georgia Guidestones as I would imagine, at least a large part of the tourism? What's life like living with that?
Well, Georgia has, or Elberton in particular, has long been a hub for the granite industry. We've been in business here for over 125 years, quarrying and manufacturing granite-related products, and realistically, we are one of the largest granite-producing areas in the world, and bill ourselves as the granite capital of the world. And I think that people have always known about Elberton, Georgia as a granite-producing area, but I will tell you that, truthfully, more people know us today, I think, because of the Guidestones than they do because of the amount of granite that we produce here.
To tell you the truth, if honestly, that's the only way I really knew about that area of Georgia. So it definitely seems like it's obviously taken over from now. It's not only the granite state, but it's also the Guidestone state. So do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing? The Georgia Guidestones at least bringing this type of attention, at least to the state.
Anytime that you can bring tourism in, I think it's a good thing. And anytime you can bring recognition to your area, I think that's a good thing. Personally, I really think that the Guidestones are a great representation of the type of work that we do here in the granite industry. And although we did not actually design them, nor did we commission them, we did build them, and they were built by artisans and skilled labor here in the granite industry, and I think they're a great example of the type of work and of the stone that actually comes from Elberton, Georgia. It's all a great representation of that.
Oh, it really is a beautiful piece of work. It's physically impressive, like you said. It's really is a magnificent piece of work. It's a masterpiece. I don't work in the industry, but from a third party or someone who's not really involved, I mean, you can just, the beauty of it in itself, I believe, speaks for the work that you guys did. But it is a true engineering masterpiece. It's I believe it's a compass, a clock, and a calendar. All those three things, right?
It does have some aspects of being a timekeeping piece. It does allow you to view some of the solstices and the rise and set of the sun and the moon. So it does have some of those capabilities, and I think it while it is meant possibly for a future generation, it is also meant for people that are here today to see and to look at the inscriptions and to see how they fit into our life today, and to make their own interpretation of how they want to view those.
What's your personal opinion, and I guess maybe even interpretation on the Georgia Guidestones?
Although I was alive, I wasn't here when they were put up.
Right.
And just like everybody else, I'm left to interpret somebody else's words. I can read what they say, and I can try to fit them into a personal view of what I think. But I think everybody views them differently, and everybody gets something different out of the wording. A lot depends on whether you, I think, apply it in our society today, or whether you apply it into some future society that is not here, in this area, right now. It just depends on how you want to interpret them.
How'd you get involved with Elberton Granite Association? The company that built it. What's your official position?
My official position is I'm the executive vice president of the Elberton Granite Association. I've lived in Elberton for 20 years, although I actually worked in an entirely different field. I was in public safety, and I've got a background in safety and management and leadership, and so that's kind of how I got into this position. And really the association is, we don't produce granite and we don't manufacture anything granite products. Mm-hmm. We're just the support agency that supports all of the entities that do that work. So I have about 75 members, and they range anywhere from actual companies that quarry granite out of the ground to companies that manufacture it into the different products, such as headstones, tombstones, war memorials, and then I have members that also do ancillary functions such as trucking and supply and different things like that to support the industry. And
like you said before, you weren't around when this, when the Georgia Guidestones was originally commissioned. At the time, it must have been the biggest project that they've ever worked on. Has Elberton worked on anything since then of that nature and that size?
We have worked on some big projects. I still think that the actual stones themselves are some of the biggest pieces to ever come out of a quarry. They were so large that they actually really taxed the systems at the time to even get them out of the quarry. So it was kind of unique that they actually were able to get them in their current state, because they had to come out as one piece. They were the largest pieces to come out up to that time, and for them to be able to actually get them out was an engineering feat.
Yeah.
And we've done some big pieces, but they still rank up there as probably one of the biggest single piece projects that we've done.
Yeah, I'm not really sure you guys may ever top something like that, or at least maybe with the type of attraction or the amount of people that it brings in. It really is such an amazing piece of work, and
it does bring in a lot of people.
How much would something like that cost today, if you know, and then maybe how much, if you can talk, how much that cost then?
I don't know the exact figure of what it was back then. If you were looking something of that magnitude today, you would be definitely probably up into the millions of dollar range.
So you would imagine, because of the limitations at the time, it would have cost that much more, maybe even tenfold. So obviously the person, R.C. Christian, we'll talk about him, the person who's behind it and the group that's behind it, they must have to have been wealthy individuals.
I don't know where their funding came from.
True.
The individual that commissioned them, I don't know where his funding would have come from, and again, I don't know the price tag on what they were back then. So I'd have to assume that it was a fairly significant amount.
A nice pretty penny, to say the least.
Where it came from, that's anybody's guess.
A pretty penny, to say the least. And we just talked about R.C. Christian. He's the person who is the pseudonym, a self-named pseudonym for the person who's supposedly responsible for it. And you're the vice president, so I'm sure you're familiar with the story of how it all came to be. Do you mind sharing it from your perspective and from your knowledge of how Elberton Granite came to essentially make and manufacture or be responsible for the Georgia Guidestones?
Well, I actually, had talked to several people that were here at the time, and I actually do know one of the individuals that worked in my office here. Now, this was many years ago. Uh-huh. He actually did meet Mr. Christian, and he is still around. I still have talked to him, and he's given me some information about things that went on back then. Although he didn't know him personally, he does remember seeing him.
Obviously, if we were to give out a physical description, it really would be pretty worthless. It's such an amazing how this origin story is shrouded in mystery, and this person, R.C. Christian, Now, there's one person, I'd imagine at least Elberton is a somewhat of a small community. A lot of people probably know each other. It looks like there's only one person who really knows the identity of R.C. Christian. He's still alive, Wyatt Martin. He was, I believe, the head of the bank that was responsible for the financial aspect of all of this. Are you familiar with Wyatt?
I'm not personally knowledgeable about Mr. Martin, although I do know the story about how all of that came to be. And basically, and you asked me a second ago, and I don't think I really answered it completely, but evidently Mr. Christian came into town, and he had inquired at several places about getting some granite work done, and ultimately he was referred to the Elberton Granite Finishing Company, and that company at the time was owned by a man by the name of Joe Finley, who was also the mayor of Elberton. And Mr. Christian inquired about this granite monument, and the story is Mr. Finley really was not quite sure this gentleman was legit, and so to kind of pass him on, he sent him to the bank to deal with the banker, and through talking with Mr. Christian, the banker realized that he was indeed serious, and told him that basically I can't do business with you unless I know your true identity.
Of course,
and, so the identity of Mr. Christian supposedly was told to Mr. Martin, with the strict instruction that he was not to divulge any information, and that there was to be no pictures made of him, and that when the business transactions were completed, that all records were to be destroyed.
And supposedly, I don't know if you've heard this, that a few years ago, Wyatt Martin, the banker who you're talking about, who actually knows who the identity is, supposedly he said that he never, or at the time, less than 10 years ago, he never threw out the hard-sided case or the IBM computer that has this information on it. Have you heard anything about that since? If he has thrown it out, rumor going around the town?
I have not ever heard that. Mr. Martin does not live. He does not live here any longer. He lives in another part of the state, and so I do not have any contact with him, and I don't know anybody that does either. So if that is a true statement, I wouldn't be able to back that up whatsoever.
He's probably lounging around enjoying his well-earned retirement. Good for him. I don't think we'll ever actually know who R.C. Christian is. Do you think we'll ever find out?
I don't. Evidently, the one thing I did hear is that even after the Guidestones were unveiled, that there were some correspondence maybe that had come in to Mr. Martin from Mr. Christian, and they were always postmarked in different places around the country, so it was never able to be pinned down exactly where the correct location would be. But that some time ago the correspondence stopped, and Mr. Christian was already aged, I guess, although I don't know his exact age, but the description was that he was an older gentleman, so it may be that he has passed away, and therefore nobody would ever know now.
Yeah, I think it's lost to time, and it's probably a good thing. Let the message speak for itself, just like how R.C. Christian and the people responsible for it wanted it that way. So it's probably best, and I think that makes it even more alluring and attractive. Excuse me. And they have been vandalized a few times in the last decade. Do you know who's responsible for the cleanup and also who pays for it, for the maintaining of it?
The Guidestones really they were deeded over to the Guidestones themselves on the land were deeded over to the county, and for many years from the 80s through into the 90s, they were a local thing, and people may have heard of them and they may have come to see them. But it really wasn't until into the late 90s, I would think, in the early 2000s, when the internet really became a much greater vehicle to access information, that the Guidestones kind of took on a life of their own. And people started to be able to hear about them through the internet. And that's when they really started to get almost like a cult-like following, I would say. And we did see some vandalism occur with them into the 2000s. In actuality, Joe Finley, who was the mayor, he actually had gotten with me many years ago when I owned a cleaning company here in Elberton to go out and clean the Guidestones after they had some spray paint and vandalism on them. And so I actually went out there and cleaned them one time many years ago. But since that time, we've had other instances of vandalism that have ultimately resulted in us actually putting a surveillance system up on them that's now monitored by the local sheriff's department and 911 center.
So you're saying the New World Order, there's no one from there coming to clean it up. It's you guys that have to clean it up. The people who live there. It's that's so sad.
Right. We don't. I mean, we don't want them to look bad. I mean, there's a lot of people that come, and we want them to come for more than just the Guidestones. We want them to see them, but we want them to come to Elberton and see Elberton and eat lunch here and look at the other things that we have to offer. And we don't want some of the negative comments and even some of the vulgarity that's been put on them to, reflect the town of Elberton.
It's so sad how disrespectful some people could be. You guys, the people of Elberton are there. They're gracious from what I've read about people who come in, the tourists, to specifically see it. And it's sad that you guys have to be the ones who suffer from the vandalism and the ones who have to clean it up, sadly. Hopefully people will learn that through conversations like the ones we're having here, that maybe there's really nothing nefarious behind it. The public, it's really something for the public and to enjoy, and don't disrespect it for people like you who have to live there.
Well, like I said, whatever the message might be on them, whether you believe it or not, or whether you find it inspiring or whether you don't, it doesn't need to be you don't need to vocalize your opinion through malicious intent on them. Just take it for what it is and go upon your way with your own interpretation of it, and let somebody else get their interpretation of it without having to be subjected to negative thoughts and comments in a vandalistic type of way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Very well said. And about a year after the Georgia Guidestones was erected, the Elberton Granite Association, they came out with an actual guide about how they became involved in the process and the actual process behind manufacturing it. And you can actually still find this online. I'm wondering, why did the company, the Granite Association, feel the need to have this accompanying guide?
Are you talking about some sort of a brochure that came out about it?
Yeah, I found this brochure online, and it was dated 1981, and it was made by the Elberton Granite Association, and it talked about the people involved, the story behind it. Did a lot of profiling of what happened then. Essentially, their whole involvement in it. Are you familiar with the brochure?
Right. Are you talking about the one copyrighted in 1981 by the Elberton Granite Finishing Company?
Yes, I am talking about that. Right, exactly. I'm wondering, why did they feel the need to create such a brochure?
This was an amazing piece of work that had not been... we had not seen anything like this in the past. This was something entirely new, and it was just so monumental and so massive that I think they really saw that maybe there was a lot more need for large-scale monuments than what they were presently doing. And so, they might have seen this as a chance for them to show that they were capable of more than just producing headstones, tombstones, things of that nature.
I think the brochure, it really was a wonderful accompanying piece. And are there any original copies hanging around? I'd love to get my hands on one, to tell you the truth, a copy.
Yeah, I'm holding one in my hand as we speak.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll give you my address. You can send me that one later on. And the guide really does have a lot of great information on it, so anyone who's really interested in this, they can view it online. I think Wired magazine has it online, has it posted. But inside that guide, there are a few... It leads to a few questions that maybe have never really been properly looked into. And so inside the guide, it talked about the sandblaster, Charlie, I believe his name was Charlie Clamp, who was there doing the sandblasting at the time. Mm-hmm. And he said, quote unquote, he heard strange music and disjointed voices as he quoted, as he carved out the English part of the structure. But they never really went into any details about that. I'm wondering, have you ever spoken to Charlie about these comments? I believe he's passed away, but have you ever spoken to him?
I have spoken to Charlie Clamp. I actually knew him quite well, and yes, Mr. Clamp did pass away here last month, actually.
Oh wow! I'm sorry to hear that. I didn't realize it was that recent. My condolences.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Charlie Clamp was one of the finest men that I had the pleasure of knowing here in Elberton.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about him. What was he like?
He was a true Southern gentleman, just very dedicated and just really knowledgeable about a lot of things. He had traveled a good bit and had decided to settle back in Elberton and had gotten involved with custom sandblast work and actually owned a business here and worked for several of the companies and just did phenomenal sandblast work. Just a true master of his craft.
Yeah, clearly by the piece you can tell. So he made those comments. Did you ever talk to him about what he said there and his experiences?
I don't know if he and I ever spoke directly about it. I've heard that and I've read some of that.
It's just such an interesting thing.
I wouldn't know Charlie to tell something that wasn't true. But I don't think that he ever really elaborated too fully on that. At least I've never heard much about it.
Was this something that, I guess you're probably aware of, though, but did he have any emotions toward it? His experiences, did he view all of his experiences positive when he was sandblasting, even those weird, whatever you want to put that under, experiences?
I think Charlie took his work very seriously, no matter what it was, and I mean, they looked at this as another project and something that they hadn't done before, and to that scale, and that it was something that he was going to do to the best of his ability. And that's one thing I know about Charlie, is that whatever he did was to the best of his ability, and he was going to make sure it was right and it was correct. As to what he may have experienced while he was doing it, I couldn't say. But he was a fine individual, and he did a lot of work locally here. The
monument itself is a testament to his work and its beauty and his his professionalism and his mastership of the trade and the craft itself. So that stands as a monument to him in itself, also.
And in fact, Charlie has a son that lives here in Elberton, and the last time we had to go out to do some restoration work on the Guidestones, he actually headed that up for us, and he went out and did quite a bit of sandblast work. He was trained by Charlie, and he went out to help us do some restoration work, and I think he feels a loyalty and an ownership and a somewhat of a kinship to the Guidestones, just because his father was such an integral part of it. And so that's one of the resources that we use to try to keep these these available for people today and in the future.
Charlie must have been a true master, not getting distracted by the strange music and the weird voices. God bless him. God bless him. Coming back to the guy that we were just talking about, something that I noticed, every time the word Georgia Guidestones was used, it was in bold, and it also had a little copyright trademark symbol next to it. In the beginning of the pamphlet, it states that the Elberton Granite Association, I believe, may have copyrighted that. Is there any relationship there? Was Georgia Guidestones copyrighted by Elberton Granite Association? I'm just wondering.
No, it was copyrighted by the Elberton Finishing Company.
Oh, excuse me, Finishing Company. I apologize.
The Elberton Granite Finishing Company is the one that copyrighted.
I was just wondering, is there any profits that are being made off this type of copyright?
No, not that I'm aware of. In fact, this book is not even in circulation any longer, so the books are not even being reprinted. They were for sale at one time in our museum, but they have long since been sold out, and they're not even being reprinted. So there's nothing really profit-wise that's being made on this whatsoever.
Yeah, I didn't think so. It's just I just noticed it, so it just kind of struck me, and I felt the need to ask about it. So
back in the day, I'm sure that they thought that that it was something unique, and they decided to copyright it, and just so that it couldn't be used in any ways that they didn't want it to be used, and so but there's really nothing profitable that's being done with it today. It's free for anybody to take a look at it. So the copyright, I think, was maybe just meant to protect the name itself.
Last year, I guess back in 2009, there was a notch put into the monolith, and then last year there was a cornerstone put in there with 2014, obviously. Was the EGA responsible for this at all?
No. But I do know the story of it, and I actually have both of those pieces sitting in my office. I'm actually looking at them right now.
Wow. You mind sharing that story?
I can. I can tell you the actual story of what happened to it.
Yeah, please, because I don't know why. I was like, this is the one question I have to ask, and of course I forgot about it until the end. But yeah, tell me about that story. What happened there?
Back in 2009, there was a section of the English version of the Guidestones that was removed, and it was taken, and later a cube was put into its place.
Right.
Back last year in August, I think around August, a cube was put into its place, and it had some dates on it, and it had some initials on it.
Right.
And there was a lot of theory on the internet, and YouTube had videos about it, about what this meant, and it was everything from it meant the end of the world to anything else that anybody wanted to conjure up in their mind.
Yeah, a lot of conjecture, however, to say the least.
Right. I know the true story about.
Oh, please.
When the Guidestones were being installed in the 80s, when the top cap was set onto the Guidestones on the uprights, there was a corner that was had a high spot on it, and when they set the Guidestone top cap on it, they chipped the corner when they put it in there. Okay, and so they tried to fix it, and they were not able to fix. They were not able to fix it. They chipped out a big piece of it, and it just didn't look right. So what they did was, when they took the top cap back off the Guidestones, they cut out a square block section where it had been damaged. And then they went and got another piece of granite that matched in color, and they cut it to the same dimensions, and they put it up in the very top corner, so it's 16 feet up in the air. It stayed like that from the 80s until 2009, when a gentleman came, and he must have noticed that there looked like there was a section up in there that was different from the rest of the Guidestones. And so he climbed up there one night, got a ladder, climbed up there, and he actually cut out that block, that section. and he took it. And so everybody knew that a section had gotten stolen from the Guidestones, and that is when the initial camera system was put up to monitor the Guidestones.
So we don't know who actually took it.
We do, because about a year later, he brought it back.
Another gentleman, another Southern gentleman.
He brought it back, and he claimed that he had taken it to harness the energy out of it, and he must have gotten all the energy out of it, and he decided to bring it back to recharge it. Maybe, I don't know.
Oh, how nice of him!
in his process of climbing back up to put the cube back up in its place, the original cube, the sheriff came out to visit him.
he didn't know that the cameras were probably installed afterwards.
Observation.
Huh. So what happened to him?
He was promptly arrested for vandalism and for theft, stealing a part of the Guidestone. He confessed to have taken the original piece, and he actually had the piece in his possession, so we were able to get it back, get the original piece back, but we never put it back into place. We just left it cut out because we were worried that if we put it back, somebody else would come and they would try to take it as well.
Right.
And we might not get it back, so we kept it. And then when the mysterious cube got put up in there, that created a lot of additional controversy and theories about what was actually going on. In reality, the cube was placed there by a gentleman who was trying to show his love and affection to his new bride as they had gotten married at the Guidestones, and the initials and the dates represented their wedding day.
Ah, wow.
And they lived in another state, and through some detective work, we figured out what had happened, and the gentleman was contacted and did not even realize that it had become an issue, and actually did confess to us that that's what it was, and that the dates were merely the dates of his wedding to his wife. They had gotten married at the Guidestones, and the initials were their initials.
Wow. So it's not the New World Order.
I actually have that cube in my office as well.
So you mean it's not to date when Ebola spread or when the world was ending? It turns out it's a commemoration of love.
It was a commemoration of love, yes.
Wow. And you have it in your desk. That's probably the best paperweight I've heard in a very, very long time, quite frankly.
Yes, I have both of them. They're sitting side by side, keeping each other company.
That's pretty amazing. And what's interesting, going back to that guide again, just briefly, R.C. Christian and the people behind it said that they can envision later on actually adding on to the Georgia Guidestones. So I think people maybe thought that this could have been related to that. Is there any planned additions that were originally told to EGA that they haven't told anyone about? Or the Georgia Guidestones is essentially going to stay as is?
I'm pretty sure that the Guidestones are going to stay as is. I have heard other theories that there were additional plans for it, but they were never followed through with. And I doubt very seriously if anything would ever come of that.
Okay, so
that's not to say that it wouldn't, but I just don't see it happening at this time or in the future.
So
that's just my perspective on it.
So are there actually plans right now somewhere physically located that said about a future plan, or it was just more of a rumor than anything?
I've heard people say that there were actual physical plans, but I don't have any that would show that. They had just said that they had heard that there might have been additional stones added at some point in the future, but that never transpired.
It's so funny how people kind of put their own biases. the Georgia Guidestones. If they think there's something nefarious going on, then that's evidence A that's what it is.
Oh yeah, people they get an idea and they run with it, and it's perpetuated by others, and before you know it, it's just spreads like wildfire. But in reality, really and truthfully, they're not anything other than just an interesting object of somebody's creation that happened to be in Elberton, Georgia.
I really do think that in the end, there's nothing really malicious about this. It's really just a pure idea in a sense, in hopes for future generations to maybe get it right. And I think maybe it rings very true because it was anonymous. No one takes credit for it. The message speaks for itself. And, like I said, I may not agree with everything, but, I see the perspective and the beauty in the monument itself. And, well, just give us your lasting thoughts on the actual Georgia Guidestones.
I definitely think it's a great tourist attraction. I think it's, if you have the capability to come and see it, it's definitely worth the 25 miles off the interstate that you're going to travel to come see it. Just to say that you have seen it. While some people look at it and really they love the beauty of it and they love the immense size of it, there's other people who look at it and they dislike the writing on it, and they think it has messages that go against what they believe, and that's fine. That's that's their opinion, and they are certainly entitled to that. But just from the sheer size and the beauty of what was constructed, it is really something to see. And I think that it was meant to last for not just this generation, but for generations to come. And hopefully it will survive just the natural forces of the world that cause things to decay and to fade away, and also to withstand any human interaction from people that may not want it to stand, and that it stands for centuries to come, for people to see it and to make their own interpretation of what they think about it and how it fits into their own personal view of life.
Well, very well said. And Chris, before we let you go, give out EGA's website information and how people can get in contact with you in case maybe they want to make their own Georgia Guidestones.
Elberton, the EGA does have a website. It's kind of in the process of an update. EGA Online, you can access our website, or just Google search the Elberton Granite Association. A Google search of the Guidestones will also turn up more information than you can possibly read in one sitting. And you can find us if you happen to come through Elberton. You can come and not only see the Guidestones, but you can come to the museum and see some of the things that here are related to the Guidestones in our museum, along with some other pretty interesting artifacts that we have here in the museum as well. We have actually a very interesting artifact that also has quite a bit of a lore to it as well. It's a granite piece that was made here.
Really? What do you want to tell people about that, or you're gonna just make people visit?
No, I can tell you what it is.
Yeah, you intrigue me.
Equal amount of interest.
You intrigue me. I must say.
Actually, the very first granite statue that was ever produced here in Elberton. It's how the granite industry first got its start back in the late 1870s. Mm-hmm. The granite was being produced here for the railroad, to make the gravel for the bed of the railroad. And some of the local women in town who were on the Confederate Veterans Memorial Society wanted a statue to go in the center of the Elberton Square to honor their Confederate soldiers who had died in the war. And so they got with one of the prominent businessmen that owned a granite quarry, and he provided them with a piece of granite and a place for a craftsman to work. And a sculptor was brought in, and he sculpted a granite statue. And it took him a few years to do it, and he sculpted the statue, and it was placed on the square in Elberton in the late 1890s. And it was unveiled in 1898, and the statue was a memorial to the Confederate veterans. Well, unfortunately, the sculptor was from up north, and the statue that he created was not what the townspeople considered to be the image of a Confederate veteran, and actually looked very northern in appearance, and even had the uniform features of a Union soldier. And it's theorized that he really never even saw a Confederate soldier.
Clearly.
And so he unveiled this statue, and its appearance was very short and squat looking, and he was immediately compared between a hippopotamus and a Pennsylvania Dutchman, and he was affectionately named Dutchie. And the townspeople at some point after his unveiling started to somewhat despise Dutchie.
Yeah, I would imagine.
And he only stood on the town square for 2 years before finally, on an August night in 1900, a mob basically threw a rope around Dutchie and pulled him off of his perch, and he fell to the ground where his legs broke off, and the pedestal portion of where he was standing broke, and they dug a hole right on the square, and they buried Dutchie face down on the square as an act of disrespect. And Dutchie lay buried on the square in Elberton for 82 years until he was exhumed in 1980, and he was put in our museum.
Absolutely fascinating. I'm a New Yorker, if you probably couldn't tell by now, and obviously a Yankee. So you have a Yankee smiling over here.
It's a really interesting story, but it is true, and that statue, the very first statue that was ever produced here in Elberton, is actually in our museum. And basically, he was the bane of everybody in Elberton. They did not like his looks, but when Dutchie was unearthed in the 80s, 82 years later, he would have been smiling at the industry that he created, because the granite industry as we know it basically was spawned off of Dutchie's creation.
He got to see it after all those decades.
He did. So he basically started what we have here today. So he won.
So Georgia Guidestones, in a sense, can be attributed to Dutchie. Well, absolutely wonderful.
In some way, yeah.
I can't wait to see Dutchie and obviously the Georgia Guidestones when I'm definitely going to be coming to visit soon. And Chris, I'm going to make you come out and be my tour guide. So you don't have a choice in that.
Yes, definitely come and see me. I will give you a tour through the museum, and we'll go and we'll visit the Guidestones, and we'll look at the quarry where it came from, and we can see some of the finishing plants where things are made.
Christopher Kubas of Elberton Granite Association, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it, and giving me a piece of your time.
No problem. It was enjoyable. I really appreciate you calling and talking to me.
Another first for the Mind's Eye. You better not forget where you heard this breaking news and the real truth about the Georgia Guidestones. Much appreciation to Chris for helping us strip the conjecture that surrounds America's Stonehenge. If you wanted to read just a little more about the mysteries and some of the things that we've talked about tonight, we have a digital copy of that companion brochure that we talked about earlier in the interview. It's uploaded right now on our website, themindseyemedia.com. Once more, themindseyemedia.com. Join me again next week, right around the corner, March 31st. We're going to give you a bit of food for thought with a science smorgasbord. Mick O'Hare, editor of New Scientist, is going to drop by the studio and discuss his book, Know It All, 132 head-scratching questions about the science all around us. And that about does it for the show tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Mind's Eye. I'm your host, Brian Turnoff, and you're listening to Z Talk